everyone, and welcome back to our next episode of Big Data Talks, in which we have conversations with industry experts about the way in which data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence are changing the way we live. My name is Jan-Willem Middelburg, and I will be your host today. I'm the author of the Enterprise Big Data Framework, which is hosting this series of Big Data Talks. You can always watch back the recording of this discussion on YouTube, the Big Data Framework website, and the podcasting platforms on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Today, I'm super excited to announce my next guest, Mr. Danny Fong, who's based in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Danny is an experienced executive and an expert specialist in team leadership, account management, sales management, business intelligence, strategic planning, and IT leadership. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Iowa State University and a Master's in Business Administration from UWS. Danny currently serves as the Senior General Manager at CTOS Data Systems in Malaysia. And this is one of Malaysia's leading credit reporting agencies. You can immediately see why I would like to talk to Danny, because the credit management world has a lot of data, which is a very interesting topic to dive into a little bit more deeply. CTOS provides individuals with personal credit reports and businesses with comprehensive online systems that allow individuals to manage their business credit risks via credit checks, customer reporting, and trade references. Before having this position, Danny served at senior roles in companies like Cisco, Symantec, Motorola, Dell, Oracle, and Crayon. I'm super happy to welcome you today, Danny. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the podcast this morning.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's an absolute pleasure. So let me get started with a question that I basically ask to all of my participants. And that is, where does your fascination for technology and more importantly, data actually comes from?
Well, my fascination for technology actually stemmed from a very young age, where I think my parents brought me to watch a movie, Star Wars.
Star Wars.
The Star Wars trilogy actually implanted ideas into me that how technology can play a part. And this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. Imagine that, and the way that Star Wars was filmed. It actually changed my mind on how technology can actually change the world.
Yeah. And do you have a specific example of a specific scene or something that you found in Star Wars? You say, well, hey, this was so forward thinking. This is something that I still remember as something that really triggered my fascination.
For me, the biggest thing was when the first part, when it first started, Star Wars, where you have all the lights shining and at the speed of light, that I was like, God, how was that? How did they do that? To me, as a young kid, it was like, wow, it just completely mesmerized me, completely, completely just got me addicted to it.
Absolutely.
Right? So and then it was like, it's like, how did they and like big starship carriers and how can they move along, that sort of thing completely blew my mind away.
Very, very interesting. So as a next step, you decided to use your fascination for technology and then turn that into a career. So if I can ask you, how did data and obtaining knowledge around data, how has that fast-tracked your career?
A few things, right? You see, data is actually the truth. Nothing beats data. It's all the truth, and it's how you're able, and it allows us to try to predict what the future is, try to predict how and make our assumptions accurate. This is extremely important, and being in CTOS right now, with a 72% market share here in Malaysia, has completely changed the way I see data. We have data coming in from multiple different sources, and the most important that for CTOS is that data that is truthful, data that is collected correctly and legally, That's very important for CTOS.
And do you have processes for that in place? Because I think you're touching upon a very, very interesting point is how can we trust the data that we're looking at? And in some of the previous conversations, I said, well, this is one of the most difficult points in order to do right. So how do you safeguard quality of data?
Number one, okay, so there are two prongs. Why I say two prongs is that data that's coming in and data that's going out. Okay, so there's two sides. When I say data that's coming in and data that's coming out, why is that important? It's because of the fact that CTOS has spent a lot of money to ensure that our data is safe. We have worked with the leaders of the world, okay, the leading software, leading solution, leading services people in the world to ensure that our data is safe. Okay?
Yeah.
Data coming in, we only use or get data from reliable sources and credible sources. Okay.
And if I can expand 1 second on that, because I think you're touching upon something very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Vetting those data sources. There needs to be probably a process or some kind of an audit that you're doing on those suppliers or on those vendors. Are you using any kind of like standards or certifications or specific elements with which you can measure whether data is actually valid or true or not coming from unscrupulous sources? I'm very interested to learn a little bit more about that.
We at CTOS, we actually have a department, a compliance department, who does nothing but to ensure that everything is compliant. Because we are governed by the registrar under the Ministry of Finance. Okay. So we have to submit reports. We have to do audits, checks with them and for them if I'm not mistaken, on a monthly basis. Yeah. Okay, so I have an entire department who does nothing but to ensure that everything is above board, everything is right, okay, and there is these are the right data, everything on top of that. So
wow, so there's an entire department that is looking into the validity of data. Wow, that's quite interesting.
Okay, not only on humans but also on processes too. So we have processes lined up to ensure that everything gets done, and there's a very little or if not no human intervention.
Interesting. So you're mentioning that you're regulated and you have certain compliance rules which are coming from the Ministry of Finance. Obviously, I'm very familiar with how it's working in Malaysia, but I'm quite sure that everyone who's listening in their own countries will have their own regulatory approaches.
Yep.
How do you ensure that your compliance department stays up to date with all of these different rules, regulations, and to make sure that you're always meeting those standards?
Well, my head of compliance, okay, definitely, she is a she, by the way. Okay, she attends all the trainings, all the trainings available, all the meetings. Okay, she meets up with the registrars from the Ministry of Finance. Okay, she attends trainings to ensure that she's up to date. She goes for all this. Okay, to ensure that we are the latest in whatever we are doing.
So to remain leading in that area, is that correct?
Yeah. Correct. Okay. So I think we are what 4 times bigger than our nearest competitor. Okay, and we are about 500 plus strong here right now here in Malaysia alone. And we have like dedicated people doing specific things to ensure that everything's above board.
Yeah, no, it's very impressive, and it's also one of the main reasons that I wanted to talk to you. Obviously, CTOS is one of the leading providers, especially here in Malaysia. So I'm super interested to learn a little bit more around how do you deal with all of those requirements and data processes. But before we dive into that, we haven't talked a lot about you personally. So you're in charge, you're a senior general manager at CTOS. Can you tell me a little bit around what your day looks like? What are your key responsibilities? What your position entails within the CTOS?
Well, number one, I run the whole entire key account management side of things, where we are the top 500 customers here in Malaysia. Okay. In terms of sales numbers, in terms of products, in terms of creating new products, I'm part of the team that created new products, finding out exactly what and how we can use the data that we have to bring new products to the market. How can we continue to be relevant to the industry? And of course, to ensure that CTOS meets all the numbers or all the KPIs that's been stipulated for the company.
Yeah.
So these are some of my daily affairs.
Good.
Okay.
So I assume you have quite a large team?
Yeah. Well, roughly about 60, 70 people.
Yeah. So, well, I consider that a large team.
Okay.
So one of the key reasons why I think a podcast with you is very interesting is because credit scoring is probably one of the oldest applications of analytics. In every course that you go through, whether it's a big data course or an analytics course, they always bring up the examples of how do you predict a credit score? Are people going to default on their loans? It's probably one of the most famous example when it comes towards classification techniques and statistics is credit scoring models. What kind of changes and what is the impacts that you're seeing of big data on this more traditional approach of credit scoring? And what kind of innovations do you see within your industry?
If I may add, if I may start off this, okay, you're absolutely correct. Credit scoring is one of the oldest applications of analytics. Okay, why we say that is because, let's say, for example, if I were to come to you and say, hey, Yan, will you be able to give me a loan of 5,000 ringgit? Okay, well, based on this, you'll probably say, sure, 5,000 ringgit, take it. Okay, but if I will come to you and say, hey, Yan, I need a loan of like 50,000 ringgit. Yan was like, nah.
Yeah.
We are not that close. Okay, so how the rationale in coming up with all this credit scoring is to help lenders, okay, decide how much risk that they are willing, that they can take it to give that loan. Okay, so that's the thing. You know, it's like, for example, I don't know them, they don't know me, so everything has to be based on the truth. Okay, right. So if that person is of this risk, okay, am I willing to take that risk? Okay, because the thing is that, look, interest rates here in Malaysia is like what, 3 or maybe about 4 or 5%. Yeah. Okay, if I take a loan of 1 million, right, 4 or 5%, I'm only making like what, 40,000 ringgit, okay, a year. But if that person doesn't pay, I'm losing 1 million ringgit.
Yeah. Okay,
so I have to decide, or the lenders have to decide, whether or not that person is good enough for me to take that risk. So that's what basically credit scoring is. And for us as credit CRAs, what we call CRAs, credit rating agencies or credit bureaus, okay, we provide that information for lenders. Okay, so we get multiple information from multiple places. Here in Malaysia, one of the biggest things that we have is actually the CTOS, which belongs to the Central Bank of Malaysia. CTOS Centralized Credit Reporting Information System, CTOS. Okay, so we create a score for the banks or the lenders. In this case, okay, it can be, what's the lenders is because this data can be used by multiple, not only just by banks, it can be used by even telcos, even right now, buy now, pay laters, etc. Okay, to decide whether or not to take that risk up. Because that score is a 3-digit, okay, score that we have, that we based on credit score of that person. How credit worthy is that person? Yeah. So that's what we have. Yeah. Where do I see in the future? I think there will be a lot more analytics, AI, okay, artificial intelligence into this score, because it must be able to predict. The score in the near future will be able to be used as a predictability tool to predict that person, how that person will act in the future. Okay, for example.
So can I ask you some questions around that? And you should stop me if it's proprietary information or not.
Sure.
There's a lot more data available nowadays. So everyone nowadays has social media profiles. People are sharing their entire lives on the internet. Traditional credit scoring has always been around, I would say, known databases from banks and repayment and credit card agencies, etc. Are you also now incorporating these newer data streams, public available information into these credit ratings, or is that something that you're looking into doing?
It's yes and no to that question. Why I said it's yes and no is because social media, right? It has been proven that social media is not a good platform, okay, for credit rating.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, why that's the case?
Because you see, like, for example, I'm available on Instagram. I'm available on this. It doesn't mean that doesn't tell me that how creditworthy I am.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying? So it's not concrete data that I can use, okay, to come up with a credit score for me. Okay. Albeit, there are a lot of people who say that it is. Okay, it's an information to say that I'm real. It doesn't mean that my credit is real. Plus, there are a lot of.
I think that's already a very good quote for this interview. The fact that you're on social media does not mean that a person's credit rating is also real. That's good.
Yeah, because look, there are a lot of people right now, right, who has like multiple different IG accounts or multiple different emails or multiple different Facebook accounts. Okay, look, it's so easy to create a new account, right? Okay, yeah. But does it tell me how good a paymaster they are? Whether are they credit worthy? You know, there are companies out there who use this data, okay, and sell that as information to lenders, okay. But it's also proven that this information cannot really be used because there's nothing to substantiate the truthfulness of this data.
Very interesting. So I think that's a very interesting comment around whether or not social media has an influence. So one of the other things you mentioned is also that you see the world transforming through artificial intelligence and new kinds of data collection, new ways in which machine learning is being used. What are then, in your opinion, the new methods that credit bureaus are using for this data collection? And how can that improve credit ratings for individuals and companies?
Okay, there are a few things I will not be able to share, but the following is what I'm able to share. Number one, we will be using a lot of artificial intelligence. Why we say that is because we are able to right now to try to predict how that person will act in the near future in terms of whether will they face any stress financially, what are the signs that is showing, you know, so that the lenders will not be caught, okay, if that person were to miss a payment, etc., etc. So we have this thing called an early warning indicator, where it warns the lenders that there is a potential of this person that will be stressed financially in the next 3 months.
Okay.
So we will be incorporating a lot of this artificial intelligence onto this, okay, to try to predict what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah. Now, what kind of technologies are you then specifically looking at? Is it more kind of behavioral data, or is it more kind of factual data in terms of key characteristics of people, or are you trying to collect more data around individual behavior? How, because obviously those AI systems need to be fed with massive data sources. So how do you ensure that you can augment the data collection to come to these better ratings?
For us, okay, we definitely want to skew towards factual data too. Factual data is more important to us because these are facts, right? Okay, because remember I mentioned earlier on that data is truth earlier on. Okay, so for us, factual data is important, but we are starting to get into behavioral. Okay, I can't tell you what's the percentage like right now, but we are starting to get into that. What we use a lot, we use like payment history. We use amount owed. What's the credit history length? Okay, what's the credit mix, etc., etc. So we take into a lot of all this to come up with a score and predict how soon or whether that person will be financially stressed in the near future.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more around that. I know that one of the main products that CTOS is providing is called CTOS Application and Decisioning Tool. I think you abbreviated to CAD. And basically, that's the service that you mentioned earlier, in which lenders automatically have decision-making processes, and it allows lenders to very adequately and quickly see whether a potential person is worthy or is not going to be a credit risk. If I need to explain this in layman's terms, because not everyone who's listening to this podcast is, let's say, a data scientist, how would that work?
It's like this. Every lender, CTOS application decisioning is actually a solution that allows the digitization and also IT-enabled processes that the lenders use. Why is this? This is automate the whole entire decision-making process based on all the information that the reports provide. For example, the credit scoring, the CTOS inquiries, okay, the trade references. We use all that information, pump into the system, okay, and the system will automate and decide whether, based on the risk factors that the lenders can take in, and will be able to place that person onto different buckets of solutioning. Yeah. Why is this important? There will be very little human intervention. Why is this really important? Because the more human intervention that goes into the decisioning to give or not to give that loan out, okay, the less possibility of people trying to circumvent the system and change the actual decision of what it should be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? Because this application, I assume, is a black box. So if I'm a client, I'm one of your lenders, I purchase this application or take a license to it, I probably have the opportunity to enter some of the credits or the risk factors that I'm willing to take. But as a user or as a customer of your application, am I able to see how the algorithms work underneath? Or is that the magic that's happening within your application?
Unfortunately, you will not be able to see the magic like what you mentioned. Okay, the algorithms, all those are actually quite proprietary. Okay, in that sense. Okay, yes, we will all be working with the lenders to put in what are the risks that they can take and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and so that they can have the whole entire solution answer to whether or not this person is creditworthy or not within a very short amount of time. Yeah. Why I said this is very important is because in Malaysia, right, if you want to get a corporate loan, okay, it takes 90 working days to know whether or not you are able to get that loan or not. Oh, this is an example, yeah. Okay. So with this solution, we'll be able to shorten the whole entire exercise. Okay, so that the company or person will be able to know exactly where they stand, so that it will be able to help them in terms of their businesses, able to help them in terms of financially plan out what needs to be done.
Very interesting. So you mentioned that it is a black box. If I'm a customer, I'm not able to see what is actually happening under the hood. It must also mean that you need probably to have a number of, I would say, super experts, data scientists, or maybe even professors, statisticians, that will create these algorithms. Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct. So in CTOS, right, I actually have a data analytics team, okay, where there are data scientists and data engineers working for CTOS, okay, that comes up with all these algorithms and modeling Like what I said, before joining CTOS, I didn't know that you can actually do modeling, okay, on data and stuff like that. I'm like, wow, I was so mesmerized by that. Okay, so yeah, we have like data scientists and data engineers to be able to do all the algorithms and modeling and come up with crazy things that's beyond my wildest imagination.
Yeah, no, it's also what I sometimes refer to as the magic that the data scientists are doing, because it's so tremendously complex, and only very few people actually know how those algorithms are operating. And it kind of brings me to the next question. I've been living in Malaysia for the last 6 years. I know the demand for good and expert data scientists. They are incredibly difficult to find. They are even more difficult to educate. It's a very niche and a very specialistic market with only very few, I would say, true experts. How do you ensure, I've seen CTOS been growing over the years, how do you ensure that you keep the required skills, knowledge, know-how in-house to keep improving these services? Because I think that must be a tremendously difficult job.
It is. Okay. You're absolutely correct. Okay. It is a difficult job, and I think we have a pretty good HR here, pretty good HR department, who actually keep abreast and keep their ears and eyes open to what's available in the market, both in Malaysia and outside of Malaysia. Okay. Yeah. We get talents all over the world. Okay, to be here in Malaysia. You'd be surprised. I have people from Bulgaria, I got people from India, I got people from Turkey, I have people from France. Okay, it's like the United Nations here in Malaysia. Okay, here at CTOS, okay. For example, my group CEO is from Colombia, so I have a colleague from Spain, so it's like a United Nations here. Okay, and we need all these experts to put CTOS in the map so that we can continue to grow further and meet the challenging demands, okay, of data, how to make use of the data that we have. Because data is nothing if we are not making things from it. It's like oil, if you don't process it, it's nothing. Okay, so able to process it, then you can make it into kerosene, whatever not. Okay, so yeah, this is what it means is that important.
Yeah, okay, so can I say that it's becoming kind of like a global market, also specifically for data scientists, and that it doesn't matter any longer where the expertise physically is located. Is that correct?
Well, we are kind of lucky that they all are here in Malaysia. Let me rephrase that. Most of them are here in Malaysia, and others we have some in different countries, but most of them are here in Malaysia. Okay, and and making use of technology to like, for example, podcasts like this podcast, right? So we are a firm user of video conferencing and stuff like that to ensure that, conversations and meetings happens.
Good. So since you're working with a lot of data internally, you mentioned you have 800 staff in Malaysia, so it's all...
it's 500 plus right now. Direct.
So a lot of people here in Malaysia. How do you make sure that all of your staff keeps up to date with all of these latest trends? Everyone nowadays is talking about how machine learning, big data is changing the way that we live, whereas only very few companies are able to keep up with the knowledge and making people familiar around all of those new trends. How do you ensure that knowledge is being disseminated throughout your company?
The biggest things here in CTOS is that we encourage training, we encourage personal growth, okay, and all that good stuff. But the most important thing for me and my team is that we have got this so-called challenging each other, okay, sharing of knowledge and challenging each other and learning at the same time, because I believe that's the best way to learn. Okay, I also encourage people to read. Okay, because whatever we read is for ourselves, is for our own knowledge. Okay, and knowledge is wealth, right? So I'm using all these jargons and stuff like that, but it's still, to me, it's still quite traditional how information is being shared. Okay, and that it's extremely important. Yes, we can be very forward thinking in terms of technology, but ultimately it still boils down to all this sharing of information, learning, reading. Okay, it still boils down to that, and keep ourselves up to date. And because if we do not challenge or read ourselves, okay, we will miss out on everything. And I have a product team, a really good product team, okay, and they will be the ones scouring what's the next big thing is going to be, what's the next thing that we can do. Okay, I have a product team, and yeah, we have multiple different teams here. Okay, my team will share with the product team what are they hearing from the market, exactly what's needed, and the product team will be scouring through the market to say, hey, what's the next big thing?
Talking about those next big things, there's a lot of new technology coming to market. We've already talked a little bit around artificial intelligence. There's a lot of conversation around how blockchain is changing credit scores and transparency. Are there any specific innovations or technologies that you say, hey, this is something very interesting. I think this is going to change the credit scoring industry tremendously in the next few years? Is there any such technology? And if so, what is it in your opinion?
For me, is this, okay? There are a lot of people who doesn't have that we don't have any data on in terms of their credit. Okay, what I'm saying that there are more.
Just a quick intermediary question: why do we not have data on those people?
For example, here in Malaysia, I'm sure you heard of this terminology: the B40, M40, and T20. Yeah. The bottom 40%, the medium 40%, and the top 20%. Okay. Unfortunately, some of the B40s, the really low ones, we don't have. And nobody will have secrets. Even Bank Negara doesn't have data on them. Okay. Doesn't have credit data on them because they are in the what we call the unserved and underbanked. Okay. So the very near. That's why I'm sure you know about the fact that Malaysia also awarded 5 digital bank licenses out, mainly to cater for the underbanked and underserved. Yeah. Okay. And these digital banks also need information on whether or not they can take the risk of that person. Okay. So what I'm predicting is that more and more the underbanked and we will have more and more data on the underbanked and underserved in the very, very near future. That's all I can say. So using different means of data collection, using different means of and also integrating artificial intelligence on what we do to come up with a scoring for the lower rung people.
Yeah, I think your comment around the new types of digital banks that make it so much easier for people to just sign up for an account on their phone and connect them, I would say, to the corporate and the money transfer systems that already exist. I think that is a massive increase. And as you rightfully mentioned, that's around 40% of your market. So that must be a tremendous amount of new data that will be flowing into your system very soon.
We have actually started working on that already. So we will be ready with all this in the very near future. Okay, so
you mentioned already the tender that Bank Negara has been doing. There's 5 new digital banking licenses extended. Do you start reaching out to those companies that won for partnerships? Because ultimately you need to get that data from somewhere. Is that correct?
Well, it works both ways. Okay, so we know who the 5. Of course, the whole world knows who are the 5 players for the digital bank is. Okay, and we are in working arrangement with them already. With some of them. Okay, and of course, once we be able to establish where the platform is ready, where the digital bank is ready, there will be data sharing within ourselves, with them, and them with Bank Negara, etc. Okay, and yeah, it's we are here to ensure that the right and correct information flows to them, so they will be able to make a decision on how much risk that they can take and ensure that Malaysians are taken care of.
Good. Very interesting. I think that's a very interesting development that we're going to be following quite closely within the next few years.
Well, I think you will see something by this year. You don't need to wait for the next few years. I think by this year you will see something.
I look forward. Maybe we should have another session then when that has come out to see what the impact has been on that.
Sure, coffee on you though.
Yeah, for sure. Denny, we're slowly moving towards the end of the hour.
Sure.
I could probably talk to you for another hour very easily. We need to
definitely. Yep.
There's two last questions that I want to ask you, and one of the questions is basically one of the questions that I ask all of my guests, and that's also a little bit of retrospective. You might or might not know that the primary age group of the people who are listening towards this podcast are at end of their teens, so from 18 up to 25. So we have a very large audience of very young listeners, and most of them are at the start of their career. And that's also the reason that I'm asking all of my guests, if you were 18 again, or maybe even younger, sure, and you need to make a decision on what you're going to be studying, what are you going to be specializing in, what are you going to be doing with your life, what would you choose, and especially why?
For one, I love my undergraduate years. I love what I did. It was a struggle, yes, but I also love my life in Ames, Iowa. I love my life there. So if I were 18 again, I'll probably stick back to whatever I did, which is data. But I think right now, data is extremely important. But we need to know, we need to understand exactly what sort of human being what are the characteristics of that person is. For example, I'm not a person that's able to sit still and do data modeling. I will not be able to do that. But I am a person who's able to imagine how we can use data to benefit society, to benefit businesses. I'm more of that person. So data is extremely important. Like what I said since the beginning of this podcast, is that data is the truth. We need to understand what sort of characteristic that you are. And yes, definitely you should be dealing in one way or another, get into data. But not all is born to be a data engineer or a data scientist. Yeah, I'm definitely not one of them. But it's how we use this data to our benefits or to the benefits of society. So that's my take on it. So
I think it's very, very powerful advice. It immediately also brings me to my last question.
Sure.
One of the main objectives of this podcast, I think we've discussed it already a lot in detail, is that the reason that I started this is that I want to show people how data is changing the way that we live, the way that we are operating, how it's changing business, society, governments, and also, as you mentioned, data for good. If there's one last piece of advice that you can give to all of our listeners, what would it be?
Do not simply give out your personal data. Sincerely, I think here in Malaysia, a lot of people don't realize how important their personal data is. Just don't simply give it out, without knowing what it's for. There are a lot of people out there who just give you a little bit of a token and, just fill up this form and you get this token, whatever. No, I don't think your personal data is worth that token. That's number one. Number two, what in CTOS, what we believe is that knowledge creates confidence. We believe that every Malaysian or every people that's listening to this, should just go and get their credit score. Understand, how creditworthy or unworthy they are, where they are standing. Because credit scoring, we are only getting information and using this information and share it with the lenders. But the person who can actually change their credit, where they stand, is the person that's listening right now. Okay, so that's very important. You need to do self-check. You need to do just very easily. If you are in Malaysia, just go and do the download the CTOS app and do that.
Yeah.
Okay, why? Is because you are in control of your own credit data, and that's very important.
Interesting. I think that's a very good final piece of advice to give everyone. I'm quite sure not a lot of people are actively doing this already, so there's a world to win there. And that's also something that could benefit yourself and also shows how data is impacting your personal life. I think that's a very powerful lesson to end with. So on that note, Danny, I want to sincerely thank you for participating and making your valuable time available. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you. As I mentioned, I can probably easily do this for another hour.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your wisdom, and also your experience, especially within this domain. I think it's been a very, very interesting talk with a lot of very powerful lessons for everyone who's listening, and is truly showcasing how data is changing the way we live. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. Cheers. Have a good day.